Who remembers the Barclays Premier League? Those were the good old days, man. The players, the fixtures, the goals, the cult heroes. The fact that there was no VAR. Everything was so different back then. And you know what else was different? The top four. In the 2000s, the top four was pretty much a constant. Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea and Arsenal. They would shuffle around, but the top four was almost always made up of those four teams. These days, the table looks very different, with the likes of Chelsea and United often finishing below the Champions League places. What the heck happened? Every year between the 2005-2006 and the 2008-2009 seasons, these four teams made up the top four in the Premier League. And there were other seasons where the top four were made up of three of these four teams. They were the real OGs. They took turns winning the league. But the point is, it was always those four who qualified for the Champions League. Why did this quadruple exist in the biggest league in the world? Remember, we had three Premier League teams in the semi-finals of the 2006-2007 UEFA Champions League: Liverpool, Chelsea and United. The following season, those same teams made it to the semis again, with Chelsea and United setting up an all-English final. The season after that, the same thing happened, with United, Chelsea and Arsenal all making it to the semis. So, that was three straight seasons where three of the Big Four made it to the semi-finals of the Champions League. So yes, the OG Big Four were the best teams in Europe back then, and they looked it. United had Cristiano Ronaldo, Wayne Rooney, Paul Scholes and Rio Ferdinand, amongst other superstars. And they were being coached by one of the greatest coaches of all time, Sir Alex Ferguson. Chelsea were led by the special one Jose Mourinho, and they also had superstars like Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba, John Terry, Michael Ballack and a few other guys. Arsenal had guys like Cesc Fabregas, Robin van Persie and Theo Walcott, and were coached by the great Arsene Wenger. Liverpool had names like Steven Gerrard, Fernando Torres and Javier Mascherano, and were led by Rafa Benitez. Essentially, these four teams had quality, big names, fear factor and balance, and they were led by experienced top coaches, so they were always going to be among the best teams in the world. But things began to change in the early 2010s when other clubs decided to no longer sit back and just watch the Big Four dominate. But two main clubs took significant action: Spurs and Manchester City. The rise of Spurs and the takeover of City signaled the beginning of the end of the traditional Big Four. Spurs hired Harry Redknapp in 2008, the same year Man City was taken over by the Abu Dhabi United Group, and that year things began to change in the Premier League. Redknapp began to rebuild Spurs with new players like Luka Modric and Gareth Bale, while City's new owners began to pump a lot of money into the club, buying the likes of Robinho and Vincent Kompany. In the 2008-2009 season, Spurs and City finished in 8th and 10th respectively. But the following year, they both made huge leaps, finishing in 4th and 5th respectively. It was the first time in 4 years that the top four wasn't made of United, Chelsea, Arsenal and Liverpool. Change had arrived. In the 2009-10 season, it was Liverpool who suffered. They were pushed to 7th, while the rest still maintained their spots in the top 3. But we should have all known that this was just the beginning. In the 2010-11 season, City broke into the top 3, displacing Arsenal. So, it was only United and Chelsea left in the top 2. But City's new owners were relentless. They kept spending, buying more players like Sergio Aguero, David Silva and Mario Balotelli. And then, in the 2011-12 season, they got what they wanted. They displaced the OGs and won the Premier League title for the first time in their history. It was dramatic. The title was decided in the final moments of the last match day, with an additional time goal from Aguero to hand City the title on goal difference. It wasn't pretty, but they did it, and that was all that mattered. Of course, the entire focus that season was on City, but Spurs also held their own and finished in the top 4, which meant that the two new kids on the block had succeeded in replacing the OGs. This season, Chelsea were thrown down to 6th, while Liverpool were languishing in 8th. City, winning the league in 2012, showed other teams that it was possible for the dominance of the OGs to be broken. Yes, United returned to claim the title in 2013, and Chelsea and Arsenal made up the top 4 along with City. But there was a sign that the power was changing hands. United had been the most dominant of all the teams in England over the past decade or so, But Ferguson was leaving and other teams saw an opportunity there. He was the best coach in the world. Losing him was going to weaken United. And, well, it did. The first season after Fergie left, United slumped to 7th, their worst finish in Premier League history at the time. This allowed other teams to leapfrog them. Spurs and City both finished above United for the first time in a long time. And in fact, City even won the league. Technically, it was still a good season for the OGs, with Liverpool, Chelsea and Arsenal finishing in the top 4. But it was very different seeing City instead of United at the top. It was obvious we were in a new era. The problem was that no one had any idea how shocking this new era was going to be. We'll get to the shocker shortly. But if you're enjoying this video so far, slap a like on it and subscribe to the channel. Now, as far as the Big Four were concerned, the 2014-15 was the last normal season. Yes, Liverpool were missing, but we had Chelsea win the league, with Arsenal and United making the top 4. It felt like normalcy was being restored, but normalcy was only waving one last goodbye. Welcome to chaos. At this point, the Big Four thought they only had Spurs and City to contend with, but in the 2015-16, they were shocked to their bones. Leicester City, a club that had only earned promotion back to the Premier League the previous season, went on the most insane run and won the league. What? And you know what made it a tad bit crazier? For most of the season, the title race was between Leicester and Spurs. It was at this point that it became obvious that the Premier League had gotten a facelift. This was not the same league anymore. Arsenal were the only one of the OGs who finished in the top 4 that year. The final spot was taken up by, you guessed right, City. Now, Leicester winning the Premier League is still perhaps one of the most shocking occurrences in Premier League history, but on a deeper level, it felt like a handover season. That was the season we officially moved from the old era to the new era. The 2016-17 season was the first full season for Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola, who'd been hired by Liverpool and Manchester City respectively. We didn't know it at the time, but these two were going to create a new Premier League dynasty. In their first full seasons, they both finished in the top 4, with Chelsea and Spurs taking up the other 2 spots. But from the 2017-18 season, the Premier League became Manchester City's league. They finished with 100 points in 2018 and then successfully defended their title the following year after they were pushed to the very last day by Liverpool, eventually winning the league by just 1 point. Liverpool then came and ran everybody over in 2020, winning their first ever Premier League title in style, before City returned and went on to win the title 4 times in a row, for the first time in the history of English football. Somewhere along the line, Mikel Arteta was able to revive Arsenal to become a title challenger, finishing in 2nd place in back-to-back seasons in 2023 and 2024. And with this, we seem to have established a new set of teams. These days, the Premier League top 4 are City, Liverpool, Arsenal and one other team. One season it's Chelsea, the next it's Newcastle, and the season after that it's Aston Villa. Who's going to take up that 4th spot this season? Your guess is as good as ours. But the real question that needs answering now is what exactly caused this seismic change in the traditional top 4? Let's be honest, the biggest factor is money. City became super competitive after the takeover. Newcastle returned to the top 4 after the takeover, and Chelsea are looking like they could get back to it also after billions of pounds have been pumped into the club following a takeover. Essentially, money can buy you success in the modern game. With investment from wealthy owners, clubs can afford to buy the best players and hire the best coaches, which almost automatically leads to better results. These clubs spending big money has forced the OGs to also spend to remain at the top. It's why we now see Arsenal, who were previously always conservative spenders, now throwing £100 million on one player. Liverpool as well used to be thrifty, but at some point in the very recent past, they had the most expensive defender and the most expensive goalkeeper in football history. Essentially, money rules the world. But it's not just that, you know. Some clubs, like Aston Villa for example, have just made some wise footballing decisions which are yielding great results. From the coach they hired, to the players they signed, and even to their development of the youth system. Their healthy reliance on youth has both helped them play better football and put good money in their purse. Case in point, Jack Grealish. But another factor that should not be ignored is just the normal circle of life. United had their time when they dominated England and Europe for a long period under Ferguson, but after he left, they fell off, opening a gap for any interested team to go in and occupy. Arsenal also sank low following the exit of Arsene Wenger, and the same happened to Liverpool after Benitez left. So yeah, the circle of life. And you suspect that something similar could happen to City after Guardiola leaves. Another huge factor is the level of competition in the league these days, most of which has been brought about by the motivation to play in European competitions. The clubs you might refer to as the smaller clubs also want a slice of the national cake. They want the money, the prestige, the pull, and the respect that comes with playing in these European competitions, and they'll do anything to get that. Yes, not everybody can have wealthy owners like City, Chelsea and Newcastle. But the stories of Spurs, Villa and especially Leicester City have motivated these teams to fight to break the dominance of the OGs. If these guys can do it, we can all do it. And this has surely made the league more exciting for fans. In this new era, it feels like every season comes with its shocker. One or two of the traditional big teams will drop low, and a smaller club will take their place at the top. In the 2023-24 season, United and Chelsea dropped, and Villa replaced them. In 2022-23, Liverpool dropped, and Newcastle replaced them. In 2020 and 2021, Arsenal dropped, and Leicester City replaced them. This unpredictability makes the league more exciting. Like, who the heck is next to drop, and who will replace them? Who's going to be playing in Europe? What's the big shocker going to be? What's going to happen this season? Who knows? We just love it. But do you think we'll ever return to having a constant top 4 lineup like we had in the 2000s? I mean, we already seem to have a constant top 3. Do you think there's a team coming to cover the 4th spot and keep it that way for the next few years? Tell us in the comments who that could be. Also, what teams do you think will make up the Premier League top 4 this season? But while we wait to see which captain will be lifting the Premier League title come the end of the season, you might want to find out about some legendary captains the league has seen. If you want to know who the greatest captains in the history of the Premier League are, click this link and we'll tell you all about the top 10.